when a billionaire found a barefoot 5-year-old girl standing in the snow whispering, "Daddy told me to wait here as punishment." Everything inside him broke, and his life, and hers, would never be the same. If stories of love, healing, and second chances touch your heart, please subscribe and stay with us until the very last chapter of this journey. The wind howled down Colfax Avenue like a wounded animal that night. Snow swirled beneath the flickering streetlights, coating the cracked asphalt and empty sidewalks in white silence. Denver was locked in the kind of storm that made the whole city hold its breath. Grant Mercer gripped the steering wheel of his black Range Rover, the wipers smearing streaks of ice across the windshield. The dashboard clock read 11:42 p.m. He'd just left a late board meeting at Mercer Capital's Lodo office, his mind still echoing with talk of stock buybacks, quarterly optics, and the relentless march of deadlines. Then, through the curtain of snow, a shape appeared. At first he thought it was a bundle of clothes, or maybe a stray dog blown against the lamppost. But as he drew closer, his headlights caught the outline of a small human figure. Tiny, still, barefoot. He hit the brakes. The SUV slid slightly before stopping. Grant's pulse quickened. He pushed open the door, the cold slapping his face like glass. His expensive shoes sank into slush as he crossed the road. The child didn't move. "Hey there," he said gently, crouching down. His breath fogged between them. The girl couldn't have been more than 5. Her dress was thin cotton, soaked halfway to her knees. A tangle of light brown hair clung to her cheeks. Her lips trembled pale blue. "Sweetheart, where are your shoes?" She blinked up at him, eyes the color of thawing ice. "Daddy said I have to wait here until I learn to be good." Grant froze. "Wait here, in this cold?" She nodded slowly. "He said if I go home before he says, I'll get more time next time." A sharp sting shot through Grant's chest. His mind flashed, not to the boardroom, not to his millions, but to a single memory. His own father slamming a door on him at age 8, locking him out in the rain for breaking a vase. "Don't come back till you've learned respect." He swallowed hard. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Hazel," she whispered. "Well, Hazel," he said softly, pulling off his heavy wool coat. "I think it's time we get you warm, okay?" She hesitated, glancing down. "Am I allowed?" Grant's throat tightened. "Yes, you're allowed." He knelt, wrapped his coat around her shoulders, then lifted her carefully into his arms. Her body was frighteningly light, like a bundle of frozen feathers. Inside the SUV, the heater roared to life. Grant placed Hazel on the passenger seat, turned the temperature up, and reached for the emergency blanket from the trunk. She stared at the dashboard lights with wonder, fingers twitching near the vent as if she were afraid to touch comfort itself. He pulled out his phone and dialed 911, non-emergency line. "This is Grant Mercer. I found a child alone on Colfax Avenue, barefoot, hypothermic risk. I'm headed toward Rocky Mountain Hospital for Children." "Stay on the line, Mr. Mercer," the dispatcher instructed. "Can you check her vitals?" Grant gently pressed Hazel's fingers, watching color sluggishly return. "Capillary refill about 4 seconds. She's alert but shivering." "Good. Keep her warm and hydrated. Help is waiting at the ER entrance." Hazel's gaze drifted to the cup holder, where a packet of cocoa mix sat from an earlier coffee run. Can I drink that?" she asked timidly. Grant tore the packet open, stirred it into warm water from his thermos, and handed her the steaming cup. She cradled it like it was made of gold. "Thank you," she murmured. Then, after a pause, "Am I allowed to drink before asking permission?" Grant's hand froze midair. Something cracked inside him. Quietly, devastatingly. "Hazel," he said, voice trembling. "You don't ever need permission to stay alive." The drive to the hospital blurred through snow and headlights. Grant kept one eye on the road, one on her reflection in the rearview mirror, small face glowing in the heater's orange light. At the ER bay, nurses rushed forward as he carried her inside. "Possible hypothermia," he said, his voice slipping into calm professionalism he didn't know he still had. "Temp low, fingers pale. I've kept her wrapped, no rewarming shock." "Good job," said a pediatric nurse, sliding a warm IV blanket over Hazel. "We'll take it from here." Hazel clung weakly to his sleeve. "Don't leave yet." "I'll be right here," Grant promised. He followed them through the swinging doors into the pediatric triage unit. The hospital smelled of disinfectant and cocoa powder, a strange mix of sterility and comfort. Dr. Patel, the attending pediatrician, glanced at the chart. "Frostnip, early stages, no tissue necrosis. She's lucky you found her." "Lucky," Grant repeated softly, his eyes fixed on Hazel's hand wrapped around a stuffed bear the nurse had given her. An hour later, a woman in a dark parka entered. She introduced herself as Maya Ortiz, Child Protective Services. Her voice was calm, practiced, but her eyes softened when she saw Hazel sleeping. "We'll need your statement, Mr. Mercer," she said quietly, "and permission to log your dashcam footage as evidence for the EPC filing." "Emergency protective custody?" Grant asked. She nodded. "We'll place her in temporary protective care until the court can review it." He exhaled, staring through the window at the snow still falling outside. "What happens if her father shows up tonight?" "We handle it," Maya said. "But your affidavit, your account, could make all the difference." Grant signed the paperwork with a shaking hand. When he looked up, Hazel stirred, eyes fluttering open. "Did I do bad things again?" she mumbled. "No, Hazel," he said softly. "You did nothing wrong." She blinked, as if trying to believe him. Then she whispered, "Can I stay somewhere warm this time?" Grant's voice broke. "Yes, you can." Outside, the snow began to quiet. The storm that had swallowed the city was finally losing strength. But for Grant Mercer, something deeper was just beginning. The kind of storm that doesn't freeze, but thaws. The kind that turns power into purpose. He didn't know it yet, but this little girl would make him rebuild everything he thought he knew about love, justice, and the meaning of home. The waiting room hummed with the low rhythm of beeping monitors and muffled conversations. Snow still drifted past the windows, flakes dissolving against the glass like ghosts too tired to land. Grant sat in one of the molded plastic chairs, elbows on his knees, watching Hazel through the glass partition of the pediatric observation bay. She was lying beneath a warmed blanket, a tiny oxygen sensor clipped to her finger, soft waves of her brown hair pressed flat against the pillow. Every few seconds her lips moved, murmuring fragments of dreams or fears only she could hear. He hadn't felt this powerless since his mother's final day in hospice 20 years earlier. But even then, he'd had a role. Signing discharge papers, arranging care, handling logistics. Tonight, none of his wealth, none of his titles, none of his influence could fix what had been done to a 5-year-old child who thought she needed permission to eat. A nurse stepped into the hallway. "Mr. Mercer?" He rose immediately. "She's stable," the nurse said, offering a tired smile. "No frostbite, just frost nip on both feet. Her core temperature is up to normal. You got to her just in time." Grant exhaled, a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Is she awake?" "Drifting in and out. The social worker from CPS will be in shortly. There's paperwork to complete. Standard for an emergency protective custody case." Right, he said quietly, nodding. EPC. The acronym already felt heavier than its 3 letters should. 20 minutes later, Maya Ortiz returned, her coat dusted with snow, a tablet tucked under her arm. She looked young, maybe mid-30s, her expression steady yet kind, the kind of calm that came from years of balancing compassion against bureaucracy. "Mr. Mercer, thank you for waiting," she said, sliding into the chair beside him. "I've filed the preliminary EPC with the Denver Juvenile Court. We'll need your signed affidavit before it's finalized." "What exactly happens next?" he asked. She drew in a slow breath. "Hazel will be placed under temporary protective custody, meaning she can't be released to her legal guardian without a court order. That guardian, according to our records, is her biological father, Dylan Quinn." Grant's jaw tightened. "The man who left her out there?" Maya didn't answer directly. "We have an open record on him. Prior welfare check, unresolved case from Arapahoe County. But it was marked misfiled." "Misfiled? It happens," she said softly. "Too often." They walked toward the small consultation room. A fluorescent light hummed overhead, flickering faintly like a heartbeat on the verge of giving up. Maya opened a digital form. "This is your affidavit of finding," she explained. "Please describe the conditions of discovery: time, temperature, location, your actions before and after. Be as specific as possible. This ensures chain of custody integrity if the case proceeds to court." Grant typed carefully. His hands, usually so precise in signing million-dollar contracts, trembled slightly as he wrote the simplest details. "Found barefoot child under flickering lamp near Colfax and York at 11:42 p.m. Ambient temperature 19 degrees. Visible shivering, pale extremities, delayed capillary refill. Wrapped child in wool coat. Called 911. Transported to Rocky Mountain Hospital for Children." He paused, then added, "Child identified herself as Hazel. Reported father ordered her to remain outside as punishment." When he finished, he signed digitally, "Grant T. Mercer." Maya reviewed the entry, nodding approvingly. "You documented perfectly. Thank you." "Old habits," he murmured. "My first startup collapsed because I ignored details." Her brows lifted slightly. "And now you run a billion-dollar firm." He smiled faintly. "Some details you don't forget." The door opened. Dr. Patel entered holding Hazel's updated chart. "Vitals are stable. Mild dehydration. Frost nip on both feet. No tissue damage. We'll keep her overnight for monitoring." "Thank you, doctor," Maya said. "Can you provide a certified medical summary for the court?" "Already uploaded," Patel replied. "Time-stamped and encrypted per hospital protocol." Grant looked between them. The precision, the procedure, and realized how surreal it felt to watch his business habits mirrored in saving a child's life. Evidence logs, chain of custody, accountability. He'd built empires on those principles, yet tonight, they were being used to defend something far more fragile than corporate assets: the right of a little girl to be safe. When Hazel stirred, Maya entered the room first. Grant stayed near the doorway, uncertain whether his presence would comfort or confuse her. "Hi, Hazel," Maya said softly. "Do you remember me?" "I'm Maya. I'm here to help keep you safe for a little while." Hazel blinked, sleepy-eyed. "Safe from Daddy?" Maya's voice faltered. "Just safe, honey. That's all you need to think about right now." Hazel nodded slowly, her small fingers tracing the bear's ear. "Mr. Grant said I didn't do bad things." "That's right," Maya said. "You didn't." Grant stepped closer. "Hazel, you're very brave." She looked at him seriously. "Did I make you late for your work?" He blinked, surprised by the question. No, Hazel, you made me exactly on time. Outside the room, Maya spoke quietly. Her father called the CPS hotline tonight. He's demanding to see her. Grant's shoulders stiffened. He what? He claimed he lost track of time. He'll be notified of the EPC order shortly, which means he can't take her home. There'll be a shelter hearing in 48 hours to determine temporary placement. And what happens until then? She stays here overnight, then in emergency foster care. Unless... Maya hesitated. Unless what? Unless the court finds a non-relative willing and suitable for short-term guardianship, someone who can provide stability without legal custody. Grant met her eyes. You mean me? I mean possibly you, Maya replied. But the process is strict. Background checks, home visit, references. He nodded slowly. Then start it. Tonight. Maya studied him for a moment, perhaps expecting hesitation, ego, or a PR motive. Instead, she saw exhaustion, the kind that came from years of success and the sudden understanding that none of it mattered if the world stayed this cruel. All right, she said finally. I'll flag your affidavit for judicial review. By dawn, the snow outside had softened into quiet drifts. The hospital lobby glowed amber in the early light. Grant stood by the window, sipping burnt coffee, watching a city slowly wake under the weight of frost. Behind him, a nurse approached. She asked for you. He turned. Hazel was sitting up, clutching her blanket like armor. Her feet were wrapped in soft gauze, a cartoon bandage printed with tiny snowflakes. I had a dream, she said as he knelt beside her. It was snowing, but it didn't feel cold. What did it feel like? He asked. Like somebody remembered me. Grant swallowed hard. You'll never be forgotten again. She smiled faintly and rested her head against his sleeve. And in that quiet hospital room, while IV pumps hummed and daylight crept across the linoleum, something irreversible shifted. Grant Mercer, the man who built empires of data and distance, realized he had just stepped into the most human contract of his life. Not signed with ink, but sealed with warmth. Morning sunlight slanted through the glass walls of Mercer Capital's top floor, illuminating a table long enough to seat a dozen executives. But today, the air in the boardroom felt colder than the snow outside. Grant Mercer stood at the head of the table, his navy suit pressed, his eyes shadowed from a sleepless night. A steaming coffee sat untouched beside his laptop. Around him, the members of the board of directors murmured in low tones, their words carrying the polished sharpness of people who measured morality in quarterly reports. Elaine Cho, chairwoman of the board, adjusted her reading glasses and looked up. Before we begin with the agenda, she said, there's a matter we must address first. The incident on Colfax Avenue last night. The word incident stung. Grant's jaw tightened. You mean the little girl freezing to death in a snowstorm? Elaine didn't flinch. Yes, the one you personally transported to the hospital. The one who is now on every local news site in Denver. At the far end of the table, the director of corporate communications cleared his throat. Sir, the photo circulating online shows a man carrying a child wrapped in a coat. We can't confirm it's you, but the SUV plate matches the Mercer Fleet registration. Grant's assistant, Lauren, slid a tablet toward him. The image glowed on the screen. Blurry, grainy, taken by someone from a nearby bus stop. The headline read, Unknown Good Samaritan rescues barefoot girl in snow on Colfax. Witness says he drove a black Range Rover. Grant closed the tablet slowly. Elaine leaned back. We need to discuss optics. There are potential liability concerns. If the father sues or claims coercion, the company could be dragged into a public relations storm. We must protect shareholder confidence. He exhaled sharply. You're worried about optics while a 5-year-old nearly froze to death? Optics are ethics, Mr. Mercer, Elaine replied calmly. Public perception defines trust. If this story escalates, reporters will ask why the CEO of a Fortune 500 firm was personally involved in a CPS case. We cannot have Mercer Capital associated with child neglect scandals. Grant stared at her for a long moment, the fluorescent lights reflecting off the sleek mahogany table between them. Then he said quietly, "We can't have a world where a child's suffering is just a liability event." The room fell still. Hannah Brooks, the company's in-house legal counsel, cleared her throat. "I've already contacted the hospital's legal team. They're willing to issue a brief statement confirming that you acted as a private citizen, not as a corporate representative. That should insulate Mercer Capital from exposure." "Good," Elaine said, nodding. "And I assume you'll also prepare NDAs for the hospital staff and CPS personnel?" Hannah hesitated. "That won't be necessary." Elaine's gaze sharpened. "Excuse me?" Grant straightened. "We're not silencing anyone. Not the hospital, not CPS, not the press." Elaine frowned. "Grant, this isn't personal." "It's risk management." He stepped away from the table, walking toward the wide window that overlooked downtown Denver. Snow still dusted the rooftops below, softening the city's hard edges. His reflection stared back at him, a man who'd built walls of glass around himself and called it success. "Last night," he said slowly, "I watched a child shake so hard her teeth bled. She was afraid to ask for food. If our first instinct is to protect the brand instead of the truth, then the brand deserves to fall." Silence again, heavy, uncomfortable. Finally, Hannah spoke. "I'll document this meeting," she said gently, "for transparency." Grant nodded. "Do that, and I want a full internal ethics review, effective immediately. We're restructuring the Mercer Foundation's focus toward winter child safety. Every donation, every initiative will be public record." Elaine exhaled through her nose. "You're diverting company funds for charity?" "For integrity," Grant said. "And it's my private foundation, not shareholder capital. But I expect the board's cooperation when it comes to communications." The PR director spoke nervously. "Sir, the media's already building the narrative. Some outlets are calling you the Colfax Samaritan." Grant almost laughed, a bitter, quiet sound. "Then let them. Maybe for once, the story isn't about the billionaire who profits, but about the child who survives." Elaine folded her arms. "And when her father retaliates?" Grant turned, meeting her gaze. "Then we deal with it, legally, transparently." He paused, voice softening. "But we don't hide." After the meeting, the board members trickled out, their murmurs fading into the hallway. Hannah lingered, gathering her notes. "That was brave," she said, sliding her files into a folder. "Or reckless," Grant replied. "Sometimes they look the same." She gave a faint smile. "Elaine's right about one thing, though. Dylan Quinn may try to exploit this for money or attention. We should prepare." He nodded, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "File the preliminary TRO draft. If he approaches the press, I want a legal barrier ready." "I'll handle it." She hesitated. "You really meant what you said about the foundation?" "Yes. Call it Project Hearthlight." Her brows lifted. "After the hospital case?" "After her," he corrected quietly. By early afternoon, Grant sat alone in his office, the Denver skyline gleaming pale blue beyond the window. The hum of the city below seemed distant, muted, like sound trapped under snow. He scrolled through his inbox, messages from investors, congratulatory remarks from strangers, news alerts about the mysterious Denver rescuer. He ignored them all. Instead, he opened a blank email and began typing a message to his communications director. From this day forward, Mercer Capital will operate under one guiding question. Does this decision protect the vulnerable or protect the powerful? If it's the latter, we're already failing. He reread the sentence twice before hitting send. Then he leaned back, staring at the ceiling. His mind flickered with images. Hazel's pale fingers clutching the cocoa cup, her whisper, "Am I allowed to eat?" For the first time in years, Grant felt something that no balance sheet could quantify. Not guilt, not even anger, but awakening. Later that night, local news broke another update. Child rescued on Colfax Avenue, recovering at Rocky Mountain Hospital. CPS confirms ongoing investigation. A blurred photo accompanied the article. Grant's SUV under the amber hospital lights. The caption read simply, "Unidentified rescuer refused comment." On social media, the image spread fast. Hashtags appeared. Hashtag Colfax Girl, #Mercer Kindness, Hearthlight, Denver. In Cherry Creek, Grant watched the news silently from his living room. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, throwing gold across the dark floor. Outside, the city glittered under snow. Lauren's text buzzed on his phone. "Sir, stock price fluctuated 2% today but stabilized after your internal statement leaked. Investors call it moral leadership." He stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "It wasn't moral leadership. It was decency, long overdue." He set the phone aside, turning his gaze toward the window where snow fell softly against the glass. The same snow that had nearly taken a child's life. And for the first time, he didn't see numbers or risks. He saw responsibility. The snow had stopped, but the city still felt heavy, blanketed in a silence that wasn't peace, but aftermath. By Monday morning, the sky over Denver had turned a muted silver, and the streets glistened with thaw. Inside Mercer Capital's downtown office, Grant sat at his desk, a mug of coffee untouched beside a stack of case files he had no business owning, except that one of them now carried the name Hazel Quinn. Across from him, Hannah Brooks leaned forward, flipping through the scanned documents on her laptop. "I've gone through everything CPS sent us. The chain of custody logs are clean, but the original case file from Arapahoe County doesn't exist in the state database." Grant frowned. "Doesn't exist or isn't visible?" Hannah's voice lowered. "Both. It's been misfiled, either by accident or intent. There's an internal note from 3 years ago. Case transferred, pending closure. But no closure ever happened." He leaned back, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "That's the file Maya mentioned." "Right. She's pulling her own copy, but the state system shows a blank metadata field, which means someone edited the record manually." Grant stared out the window at the snowbanks melting along the curb. Someone wanted Hazel's past buried. That afternoon, Grant drove to Denver CPS headquarters, a plain sandstone building that looked too small to hold so many broken stories. Maya Ortiz met him in the lobby, her expression both tired and determined. "I've been working this since 5 a.m., she said. "You were right. The Arapahoe County case never closed. I filed a Colorado Open Records Act request, CORA, our version of FOIA, to retrieve the archived material." "Any luck?" She sighed, holding up a flash drive. "Partial data only. The digital copy was overwritten, but there's a backup image in the county vault. And Grant, it's ugly." They sat in her cubicle, surrounded by gray partitions and stacks of child welfare binders. Maya plugged in the drive. The screen flickered to life, revealing a scanned report dated 2 years prior. CPS Field Report. Quinn, Hazel. Subject age, 3. The summary was brief but chilling. Report of neglect filed by neighbor. Child found unsupervised at apartment stairwell. Father intoxicated. No physical injuries documented. Case marked for reevaluation pending financial assessment. Grant's jaw tightened. They closed it because he was poor. Or because someone didn't want to spend the resources, Maya said bitterly. It happens more often than anyone admits. She clicked another file, a pawn shop receipt. Found this in the county financial annex. Dylan Quinn sold a silver bracelet engraved with the initials NQ about a year ago. NQ, Grant murmured. Nora Quinn, Hazel's mother. Maya nodded. I ran the pawn shop camera footage through the police evidence database. Look at this. On screen appeared the image of a man, scruffy, unshaven, jacket torn at the sleeve, handing the bracelet across the counter. Dylan Quinn. Behind him, the flickering neon sign of a payday loan shop glowed faintly. Cash in minutes. No questions asked. Grant stared at the screen, his fists curling. Who are these people? Predatory lenders, Maya said. Unlicensed ring operating out of East Colfax. They feed on families like the Quinns, cycle them through debt and default until they lose everything. He exhaled sharply. And Hazel was the collateral. By late afternoon, they sat across from one another in the hospital cafeteria. Hazel was still upstairs under observation, drawing pictures of snowflakes and stars. Grant had promised her he'd be back before bedtime. I can get this ring exposed, Grant said. Mercer Capital's compliance division has a digital forensics unit. We trace offshore laundering all the time. Maya looked skeptical. You'd use your company to investigate a criminal debt network? I'd use my resources, he corrected. Call it pro bono, or restitution. Maya leaned in. You know, that bracelet, it wasn't just jewelry. Nora Quinn's personnel file from a closed tech cafeteria in Low-Do shows she worked there in 2014, the year before she died. Payroll records show she once comped a lunch for a visitor who couldn't pay. Grant froze. A visitor? Yes, a man who left his ID at home. She covered the meal with her own tip money. Maya hesitated. Guess whose signature appears on the visitor log? He looked down. Mine. For a moment, neither spoke. The cafeteria noise faded, trays clinking, machines humming, until all that was left was the quiet gravity of a circle closing. I didn't know her name, he said finally. I remember the woman. Kind eyes, quiet voice. I was broke, trying to convince a venture fund not to pull out. She told me, warm food helps you think clearer. She kept that bracelet until she died, Maya said softly. Sold by the man who replaced her kindness with debt. Grant pressed his hands together, fingers trembling slightly. We find every person involved, not just for Hazel, but for every kid who ends up standing barefoot in the snow because someone filed a report in the wrong drawer. That evening, Grant returned to the Mercer Capital headquarters. The office was mostly empty, just the hum of the HVAC and the faint glow of the city outside. He opened his secure terminal and connected to the company's compliance servers. His access codes unlocked datasets most law enforcement couldn't touch. He typed, cross-reference Dylan Quinn plus East Colfax pawn operations plus high-frequency microloans. Within minutes, a web of transactions appeared, payments routed through dummy LLCs, prepaid cards, and burner accounts. Among them, a familiar name surfaced, Colfax Equity Partners, LLC. Registered agent, Richard Holloway. Known alias, Ricky H. Previously flagged in a federal FinCEN report for small amount laundering. Grant sat back, heart pounding. He wasn't a detective, but patterns were his language. And the pattern here screamed one thing. Someone had profited from neglect. He saved the report, encrypted it, and forwarded it to Maya with the subject line: evidence. Colfax ring. Then he added a note. Truth has a ledger, too. At midnight, Maya called. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but urgency. Grant, I just received your data. There's a connection you didn't see. The pawn shop owner's wife is a clerk at Arapahoe CPS. She had access to the file system. Grant's pulse quickened. You're saying she's the one who buried the report? Or was paid to? Either way, it's not just neglect anymore. It's corruption. He looked out the window toward the lights of East Colfax, shimmering in the distance. Somewhere beyond that horizon, Hazel's father was drinking, gambling, or worse, trading his daughter's name for another loan. Grant's reflection in the glass seemed foreign to him now. A man who had once measured value in quarterly growth, now chasing justice across pawn slips and case numbers. Then we dig deeper, he said. When he finally returned to the hospital, the halls were dim. Hazel was asleep, clutching her bear under the soft blue nightlight. On the bedside table lay her drawing, a stick-figure man and a little girl standing beside a snow-covered house. Above them, written in uneven letters, were 3 words: Don't forget me. Grant sat in the chair beside her and whispered, Never again. Outside, the city lights blinked like tired sentinels over the Rockies. Somewhere out there, buried files and dirty money waited in the dark. But for the first time, Grant wasn't running from the cold. He was running toward the truth. The snow that had blanketed Denver days earlier had begun to melt, leaving slush and streaks of gray along the sidewalks. But outside Grant Mercer's home in Cherry Creek, the morning air was far from calm. A black sedan idled by the gate. 2 men leaned against it, smoking, waiting. Grant didn't notice them at first. He was in the kitchen, pouring cocoa into a mug for Hazel, who sat on the counter swinging her bandaged feet. She giggled when the marshmallows floated to the top. Do you like it? He asked. It tastes like Christmas, she said, smiling. He smiled back, a small, fragile piece in the middle of chaos. But then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. This is Grant. A rough voice came through, distorted slightly. You've been busy, Mr. Mercer. Playing hero. Making the rest of us look bad. Who is this? Someone who wants to help you make this go away. We both know the kid's father, Dylan Quinn, isn't exactly a saint. He's willing to settle, say $50,000 in cash. You give him the money, he signs a release, and nobody talks to the press. Simple. Grant's hand tightened on the phone. That's extortion. Call it a transaction. You buy his silence, he drops his complaint. Better for everyone, especially for your stock price. The line clicked dead. Grant exhaled slowly, the warmth in his kitchen instantly gone cold. Within an hour, Hannah Brooks arrived at his home office. She scanned the caller ID record and frowned. Numbers masked. Burner phone? Probably prepaid. Classic move before a public leverage play. Can we trace it? I've already issued a subpoena Deuces Tecum for the telecom logs. But Grant, you should know. This is moving fast. Dylan Quinn filed a parental interference claim through a third-party attorney this morning. Let me guess. Same address as the pawn shop? Bingo. Grant rubbed his temples. He's trying to sell custody for cash. Hannah opened her legal pad. We'll counter immediately. I'm filing for a TRO, temporary restraining order under ex parte conditions. That'll restrict Dylan's contact until the shelter hearing. We'll also request a gal appointment for Hazel to ensure her representation is independent. Grant nodded, jaw tight. Do it. Whatever it takes to keep her safe. Hannah glanced at him. You understand, though. He's going to make noise. Men like him don't go quiet when the cameras start looking. Noise came sooner than either expected. By mid-afternoon, the street outside Grant's house erupted in shouting. Dylan Quinn had arrived, flanked by 2 men and a shaky cell phone camera. Grant stepped outside calmly, the winter air biting his cheeks. Dylan stood by the gate, eyes bloodshot, holding a crumpled folder of papers. There he is, Dylan shouted. The rich man who stole my daughter. You think you can buy her like you buy everything else? Neighbors peeked from behind curtains. A passerby stopped to film. Grant kept his voice even. Dylan, you need to leave. This isn't the place. I'll leave when I get what's mine. Dylan waved the folder like a flag. The girl, the story, everything. The press is paying for interviews. You think I won't talk? I can tell them about your fancy ethics and your fake charities. A car door slammed. Police officers emerged, hands up in calm gestures. Mr. Quinn, step back, please. Dylan spat toward the driveway. You'll see me again in court. Grant didn't move until the patrol car disappeared down the street. Then he turned to the officer still writing notes. Make sure that's logged. Full incident report, Denver Police District 3. The officer nodded. It will be, sir. We've seen his type before. Inside, Hannah was already drafting the affidavit. This strengthens your case, she said. He just proved hostile intent in front of law enforcement. Grant stared at the window where Dylan's reflection had lingered only moments ago. He's desperate, he said softly. But desperation doesn't excuse cruelty. No, Hannah replied. It just explains it. She slid a document toward him. Sign here. Petition for protective order, Hazel Quinn, minor, per Colorado Juvenile Procedure Rule 7.3. Grant signed without hesitation. Now, Hannah continued, we prepare for the next move. The court will schedule a hearing within 72 hours. If Maya Ortiz and CPS confirm his behavior, the GAL recommendation will weigh in your favor. Grant nodded. And if he goes public before then? Then we fight narrative with evidence, Hannah said firmly. Truth has receipts. That evening, Grant drove to Lodo, to the modest CPS legal annex where Maya was finishing her shift. The hall smelled faintly of paper and peppermint tea. She looked up when he entered. I heard about the confrontation. You okay? I'm fine, he said. Hazel's fine, but I'm worried about the fallout. Maya nodded slowly. I got the preliminary report from the pawnshop case. It's worse than we thought. Dylan owes nearly $12,000 in illegal loans. The same rings under investigation by the Colorado Financial Crimes Task Force. If we tie his debts to neglect, the court can move for parental termination. Grant's expression hardened. Then that's what we do. But it has to go by the book, Maya cautioned. CPS doesn't move on emotion. We need documentation, payment ledgers, transaction histories, recorded threats. I'll get them, Grant said. My compliance division already mapped the ring's shell accounts. Maya studied him. You're not just helping Hazel anymore, are you? No, he admitted. I'm helping every file that got buried with hers. When Grant returned home, Hazel was curled up on the couch, drawing again. She looked up as he entered. Did Daddy come back? She asked quietly. He hesitated. He tried to, but the police made sure he won't hurt you again. Hazel nodded solemnly. He used to get mad when I talked about Mommy. Grant knelt beside her. What did your mom like, Hazel? She smiled faintly. Hot chocolate and stories. Good, he said softly. We'll have both. He watched her trace stars on her paper, then leaned back and whispered to himself, and this time, no one will sell your story. The next morning, local headlines began to surface online. Man claims Denver CEO kidnapped his daughter. Legal battle looms. But beneath the sensationalism, another headline gained traction. CPS confirms emergency custody was lawful. Court hearing scheduled. The truth was winning, piece by piece. Slow, bureaucratic, but unstoppable. At Mercer Capital, Hannah stood in the hallway outside Grant's office, her expression unreadable. "Elaine's furious," she said. "She says your name trending with hashtag Mercer and the girl is brand dilution." Grant looked up from his desk. "Tell her to read the comments." Hannah smirked faintly. "I did. Half the city's thanking you for exposing what happens on Colfax." Grant leaned back. "Good. Because this isn't over. The next time Dylan tries to sell silence, I want him to learn. Some stories are meant to be heard." Outside, the sun cut through the clouds for the first time all week, splintering light across the frost-slick streets of Denver. For Hazel Quinn, the world was beginning to thaw. And for Grant Mercer, the cost of decency no longer felt like loss. It felt like purpose. The courthouse on Bannock Street loomed like an old stone guardian under the pale Colorado sky. Snowmelt trickled down the steps, turning to glassy ice before the janitors could sweep it away. Inside, the Denver Juvenile Court buzzed with the quiet tension of too many lives waiting for their turn to be heard. For Grant Mercer, this was the first time in years he'd felt his pulse race for something other than a corporate merger. The polished marble floors reflected his image. A man who once wore confidence like armor, now walking into a courtroom carrying something heavier than reputation: hope. Beside him, Hannah Brooks moved with the precision of a field surgeon. "Stay calm," she murmured. "Answer only what's asked. The judge respects brevity, not emotion." Grant nodded, though emotion was exactly what sat in his chest, a low, insistent ache. Across the hall, Maya Ortiz from Child Protective Services waited with her tablet and a file stack neatly labeled EPC Hazel Quinn. Her eyes met Grant's briefly. She gave a small nod. Quiet solidarity. And then the courtroom doors opened. Judge Rutherford presided, an older man with weathered features and the kind of voice that could soften or shatter a soul. He adjusted his glasses and began. "This is case number C2157, in the matter of Hazel Quinn, minor child, currently under emergency protective custody. We are here for the shelter hearing to determine temporary placement and parental visitation rights." The clerk read names. For CPS, Ms. Ortiz. For petitioner, Mr. Mercer, represented by Ms. Brooks. For respondent, Mr. Dylan Quinn, represented by Mr. Hollister. The air changed as Dylan entered. Shoulders hunched, wearing an ill-fitting blazer that still smelled faintly of smoke. His lawyer looked like he'd crawled out of a payday commercial. Dylan glared at Grant, muttering, "You're gonna regret this." Grant didn't respond. Hannah's hand brushed his sleeve, a silent, "don't take the bait." Judge Rutherford nodded to CPS. "Ms. Ortiz, your summary, please." Maya stood, her tone measured but steady. "Your Honor, CPS received a call from Mr. Mercer on January 7th, reporting a minor found barefoot on Colfax Avenue during a severe snowstorm. Hospital records confirm early hypothermia, frost nip injuries, and statements consistent with prolonged exposure. The child reported that her father ordered her to stand outside as punishment." A murmur spread across the gallery. Journalists, observers, even a few off-duty caseworkers who'd come to watch. Maya continued, "Mr. Mercer immediately transported the child to Rocky Mountain Hospital for Children, remained on site until CPS arrived, and provided full cooperation, including dashcam footage. We have verified his affidavit and the integrity of all digital evidence. There's no indication of coercion or ulterior motive. The judge nodded. And the father? Maya's voice hardened slightly. Mr. Quinn has a prior CPS record, originally filed under Arapahoe County, marked misfiled. Subsequent investigation uncovered connections to predatory lending operations and repeated neglect reports. He is currently under inquiry for financial exploitation and child endangerment. Dylan's lawyer jumped to his feet. Objection! Unverified claims! Overruled, Judge Rutherford said quietly. Continue, Ms. Ortiz. Based on all available evidence, CPS recommends that Hazel Quinn remain in temporary placement with Mr. Mercer under supervised conditions, pending a full GAL evaluation. The guardian ad litem, a woman in her 50s named Dr. Lena Ward, rose from her seat near the jury box. She carried a small notebook with color-coded tabs and the calm presence of someone who'd seen too much pain to waste words. Your Honor, she began, I met with Hazel yesterday at Rocky Mountain Hospital. She's 5, cognitively bright, emotionally guarded. Her attachment pattern shows fear-based compliance, typical in chronic neglect cases, but what struck me most was her language. Judge Rutherford leaned forward. Her language. Dr. Ward nodded. She said, At my new house, I don't have to ask permission to eat. The courtroom went silent. Even the shuffle of papers stopped. Grant felt something inside him splinter, a quiet fracture made of both grief and gratitude. Dr. Ward continued, her voice soft but steady. Hazel's statement reflects more than safety. It reflects healing. For that reason, I support CPS's recommendation. Temporary custody with Mr. Mercer, supervised visitation for Mr. Quinn, and psychological evaluation before any further contact. Dylan shot up, slamming his palm on the table. You can't take my kid. That man's buying you all off. He's got money, I don't. That's what this is, a class war. Judge Rutherford's gavel struck once, sharp, echoing. Mr. Quinn, you will control yourself or be removed. Hannah leaned toward Grant, whispering, He just buried his own case. Grant kept his eyes forward, silent. Dylan's lawyer scrambled. Your Honor, my client admits mistakes but loves his daughter. He requests home placement with mandatory check-ins. Rutherford cut him off. Love without responsibility isn't love, counselor. It's wishful thinking. After a pause, the judge's gaze shifted toward Grant. Mr. Mercer, do you understand the responsibilities that come with temporary placement? The court will require home inspections, background verification, and bi-weekly CPS visits. Grant stood, his voice clear though his hands trembled slightly. Yes, Your Honor. I understand. Do you accept this placement not as charity, but as commitment? I do. The judge studied him for a moment longer, as if searching for arrogance or guilt or pity. Finding none, he nodded. Very well. The court grants temporary custody of Hazel Quinn to Mr. Mercer under the supervision of CPS and the guardian ad litem. Visitation for the father will be supervised at a neutral site pending evaluation. Hearing adjourned. He struck the gavel once, and just like that, in a single echo, a line was drawn between past and possibility. Outside the courtroom, reporters waited under the portico. Microphones flashed, cameras hummed, voices overlapped. Mr. Mercer, is this charity or custody? Did you buy off the court? Are you planning to adopt the girl? Grant paused but didn't speak. Then, seeing Maya beside him, clutching Hazel's tiny backpack, he stepped forward and said quietly, This isn't about money. It's about mercy. Then he walked through the crowd without another word. That night, back at Cherry Creek, the house felt different. Warmer. Alive. Hazel sat at the dining table with a bowl of soup, humming quietly to herself. Her little feet, still wrapped in gauze, tapped to a rhythm only she could hear. When she finished eating, she looked up shyly. "Do I have to ask before I get seconds?" Grant smiled, his throat tight. "Not anymore, Hazel. Not ever again." She grinned, the first real smile he'd seen reach her eyes. And somewhere in Denver, a court file was stamped placement approved. But what neither of them knew yet was that the next battle, the one for truth itself, was already being forged in shadows as people with power and fear began moving pieces off the record. For tonight, though, the house on Cherry Creek glowed with quiet light, the kind that doesn't boast, only warms. It began with a single sketch. Hazel had drawn it one evening while sitting at the kitchen island, a small house with a glowing yellow window and smoke curling from the chimney. Beneath it, in shaky crayon letters, she'd written, "Home is warm." Grant found the drawing the next morning pinned to the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a snowflake. Something about it caught him, not the artistry, but the message. In 5 letters, a child had captured what entire think tanks and marketing departments had failed to define: what warmth really means. That was the morning Project Hearthlight was born. By the end of February, the initiative had moved from an idea scribbled on Grant's notepad into a pilot program in Denver's 5 Points neighborhood, one of the oldest and poorest parts of the city, where abandoned storefronts met crumbling row houses. Grant didn't arrive in a suit or with a press team. He came in jeans with rolled-up sleeves and a paper folder under his arm. Inside the old firehouse that CPS had repurposed for community work, a half-dozen volunteers huddled around a table. Among them were Maya Ortiz, CPS social worker, Dr. Lena Ward, the gal who had testified for Hazel, and a few retired nurses, teachers, and church members. On the wall behind them hung a banner: Hearthlight, a safe, warm space for every child. Grant cleared his throat. "This isn't a charity," he began. "It's infrastructure. A place where no child waits in the cold again. Not because someone noticed, but because we built systems that don't forget." Maya smiled faintly. "You've been reading our CPS mission statements." He chuckled. "Maybe it's about time someone did." The plan was simple, yet radical. Each Hearthlight point would serve as a winter haven, open 24/7 through the cold months, offering hot meals, blankets, trauma counseling, and legal resources. It would be run jointly by volunteers and city partnerships, funded privately but accountable publicly. "Trauma-informed design," Dr. Ward said approvingly as Grant showed the layout. "Soft lighting, tactile surfaces, no harsh corners. You've done your homework." "I've had a good teacher," he said, glancing at Hazel's crayon drawing taped to the blueprint corner. Maya leaned over the table. "We'll need wraparound services, food security, counseling, access to medical checkups, and legal referrals for families under CPS review." "Already in motion," Grant replied. "Mercer Capital's ESG committee signed off on a grant. Every partner will be audited quarterly for transparency." One of the volunteers, a middle-aged teacher named Mrs. Rivera, spoke hesitantly. "And if the press asks why a millionaire CEO is suddenly building homeless shelters?" Grant smiled. "We tell them it's not about the millionaire. It's about the child who taught him what warmth means." That afternoon, Maya took Grant on a brief tour through the surrounding blocks. 5 Points had history. Jazz clubs, old diners, murals painted decades ago, but time and inequality had carved deep scars. They passed a family wrapped in blankets near a closed bus stop. A little boy coughed as his mother rubbed his back. Grant slowed. "Can we help them tonight?" "Once Hearthlight's license is cleared, yes," Maya said. "For now, we can take them to the shelter on Welton Street." He reached into his coat, pulled out a card, and pressed it into her hand. Tell them to come tomorrow. The doors will open whether the license comes through or not. Maya blinked. That's not exactly legal. Neither is letting children freeze, he said softly. Back at Cherry Creek, Hazel was building a Lego tower on the rug. She looked up as Grant entered. Did you bring more paper? He smiled. I brought something better. A place for your drawing. He knelt and spread the blueprints across the floor. Hazel leaned over them, eyes wide. See that big room? He said. That's where kids can come in from the cold. And this little corner? That's for coloring. Like me? Exactly like you. She tilted her head. What's it called? He pointed to the title block. Project Hearthlight. Hazel whispered the word slowly as if tasting it. Heartlight. That's close enough, he said with a grin. The next week, a soft opening event took place at the renovated firehouse. There were no reporters, no corporate banners, just quiet music, the smell of soup, and the sound of children laughing for the first time in months. Hazel sat at a little wooden table with crayons, carefully taping her original drawing to the wall above the fireplace. Beneath it, in freshly printed letters, a plaque read, For every child who ever waited in the cold, you are seen, you are safe, you are home. When the fire crackled to life, Hazel clapped. Look, Daddy, it's real fire now. Grant felt his throat tighten. Daddy. The word hung in the air like the softest promise. 2 days later, the story leaked anyway. A local reporter ran a small feature in the Denver Gazette. CEO funds secret winter refuge in 5 points. Refuses to comment. Elaine Cho called him that night. You understand this will set a precedent, she said over the phone. Every philanthropic cause will come knocking. I know, Grant replied, and we'll open the door. She sighed. Your ESG report will be a nightmare. Then maybe it's time we redefine what good governance actually means. There was silence on the line, the kind of silence that meant respect, reluctant but real. Weeks passed. Hearthlight's pilot center filled with volunteers, doctors, and families. Within a month, City Hall had approved expansion permits for 3 more locations. For once, bureaucracy moved like it believed in something. One evening, as Grant stood in the firehouse doorway watching kids sip cocoa under string lights, Maya approached with a clipboard. Media's calling it the Mercer Miracle, she said. He smiled faintly. Don't. Miracles are rare. This is work, and it's theirs, not mine. Hazel ran up then, waving a drawing of a giant orange sun. Look, I made a logo. He crouched to see. Inside, the sun was a small house, its windows glowing. It's perfect, he said softly. Can we hang it here forever? Yes, he said. Forever. That night, as he locked up the center, Grant lingered by the door. The faint light from the fireplace flickered across Hazel's drawings, a collection of crayon skies and paper homes. He thought of all the boardrooms he'd sat in, the speeches he'd given, the applause he'd collected. None of it had ever felt as real as this moment of quiet warmth. He whispered into the still air, We built more than a shelter, Hazel. We built a promise. And outside in the streets of Denver, the first snow of March began to fall. Soft, harmless, almost kind. The morning Denver woke to headlines about the Mercer Miracle. A darker narrative was already brewing beneath the surface. By noon, Grant's assistant stormed into his office, face pale. Sir, you need to see this. She handed him her phone. On the screen, a grainy video was already trending online. Leaked footage, CEO bribes CPS officer to keep child away from her father. Grant hit play. The video showed what looked like him. Same build, same coat. handing an envelope of cash to a woman outside a hospital. The caption read, "Mercer caught paying off CPS." For a few seconds, the world seemed to tilt. "That's impossible," he said, voice calm but cold. "That meeting never happened." "I know," his assistant whispered. "But it's everywhere." Within an hour, the Mercer Capital boardroom was in emergency session. Screens displayed social media posts, hashtags exploding. Hashtag Mercergate. Stolen child. CPS bribe. Elaine Cho's voice cut through the noise. "Grant, we need a public statement. Now." "It's fake," he said. "Digitally forged." "Then prove it," Elaine snapped. "Because right now, the market doesn't care about truth. It cares about perception." Hannah Brooks entered, briefcase in hand, phone pressed to her ear. "I've already looped in the Denver Police Cybercrimes Unit. They're analyzing the video's metadata. Don't say a word publicly until we confirm chain of origin." Grant nodded once. "Where did it come from?" "An anonymous upload from a proxy server in East Colfax," Hannah said grimly. "Guess who's behind it?" "Dylan Quinn," Grant muttered. Maya Ortiz appeared on the video call screen. "Grant, CPS just got an anonymous complaint accusing us of collusion with you. My department's under internal review. They froze Hazel's placement until the footage is verified." Grant's eyes darkened. "They're using her as leverage." Maya's voice cracked. "I'm sorry, Grant. It's procedure." That afternoon, Grant and Hannah drove downtown to the Denver Police Digital Forensics Lab. The sterile room buzzed with machines and the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Detective Avery, head of digital forensics, greeted them. "Glad you came fast," Avery said, gesturing toward a monitor. "We pulled the metadata and EXIF data from the clip. Take a look." On screen, time stamps glowed, inconsistent, fragmented. The supposed video of Grant handing over cash had multiple overlapping time codes. "It's been spliced," Avery explained. "Probably deep-faked. Whoever did it used real surveillance footage from outside the hospital, then overlaid an AI render of your face and posture." Hannah leaned in. "Can we prove it?" "Absolutely. Each frame has a hash mismatch, meaning the original digital signature doesn't align with the overlay. Once we trace the hash to its source file, we can subpoena the IP address." Grant exhaled. "How long?" "Hours, not days." Back at Mercer Capital, Elaine convened another emergency call. The PR director's voice came through the speaker, panicked. "Every outlet's demanding comment. If we stay silent, it looks like guilt." Grant's tone was even. "We don't fight fire with panic. We fight it with proof." He looked to Hannah. "Prepare the subpoena Deuces Tecum for the ISP and file a spoliation notice. We'll hold every party accountable for circulating manipulated evidence." Hannah nodded. "Already drafting it." Elaine folded her arms. "You realize, Grant, if this goes public before we clear your name, the board can invoke the material adverse clause and force your suspension." He met her gaze steadily. "Then they can suspend me. But they'll never silence me." Meanwhile, in a small apartment off East Colfax, Dylan Quinn watched the same video go viral. The smug grin on his face twisted when the man beside him, the loan shark Richard Holloway, alias Ricky H., handed him a wad of cash. "You said this would make him fall," Dylan muttered. "It will," Holloway said, lighting a cigarette. "By the time they prove it's fake, you'll be on a plane with your cut." But Dylan's grin faltered. "And Hazel?" "Hazel's none of your business now." Dylan hesitated, then looked away. Somewhere under the alcohol and desperation, a flicker of guilt tried to surface, but it drowned in greed before it could breathe. By midnight, the digital forensics lab called back. Avery's voice was sharp with excitement. "We found it. The fake was uploaded from a pawn shop Wi-Fi node registered under Colfax Equity Partners, LLC. Same shell company you flagged last month." Grant's pulse quickened. "That ties it directly to the debt ring." "Exactly," Avery said. "We've issued a seizure warrant. Expect arrests within hours." Hannah smiled for the first time all day. "I'll draft the press release. This time we go public first." The next morning, Denver woke to a very different headline. "Forgery exposed. Digital evidence against CEO proven fake. East Colfax crime ring linked to CPS corruption." The accompanying article named 3 individuals arrested overnight, including Richard Holloway, and one man still at large, Dylan Quinn. CPS reinstated Hazel's placement that same afternoon. Maya called, voice trembling with relief. "We did it, Grant. Hazel stays home." Grant smiled faintly. "No, Maya. We didn't do it. The truth did." That evening, as dusk fell over Cherry Creek, Grant sat on the porch with Hazel. She was coloring again, this time with calm hands. "Is everything okay now?" she asked. He hesitated, then nodded. "Almost. Some people tried to tell lies, but lies melt faster than snow." She looked up at the sky, where the last of winter's clouds drifted apart. "Then it'll be warm soon?" He smiled. "It already is." Inside, the television hummed with breaking news. Project Hearthlight expands citywide after false allegations collapse. The city had moved from suspicion to belief, from division to empathy. And as Hazel laid her head on Grant's shoulder, he finally allowed himself to breathe. The storm was over, or so he thought. Because while the snow melted outside, new truths still waited beneath the thaw, and the next hearing, the permanency hearing, would reveal something that neither Grant nor Hazel could have imagined. The story of the woman who had once given him warmth when he had nothing. The permanency hearing was set for a Thursday morning in early April. Denver's air had shifted. The frost was gone, and the city was waking to spring. Outside the courthouse, cherry blossoms began to bloom against the sandstone facade. Soft pink, fragile, almost defiant. For Grant Mercer, it had been 87 days since the night he found Hazel barefoot in the snow. 87 days since he'd decided that his wealth, his power, and his life would mean nothing unless they meant something for her. But today wasn't about heroism or press. Today, it was about truth. Inside courtroom 4B, the atmosphere was heavier than usual. A court officer whispered to Judge Rutherford, who nodded gravely before looking toward Grant. "Mr. Mercer," he said, "before we begin, the court has received new evidence pertaining to the late Ms. Nora Quinn, biological mother of the minor child. You may want to sit for this." Grant's breath caught. Nora Quinn. The name that had haunted every report, every file, every pawn ticket. Across the aisle, Maya Ortiz exchanged a glance with Hannah Brooks. They both looked equally uncertain. Rutherford continued, "The Department of Records has recovered sealed payroll documentation from 2014 from a startup cafeteria located on Blake Street, previously registered under Mercer Technologies, Inc." Grant froze. Rutherford read slowly. Ms. Nora Quinn was employed as a cafeteria attendant from March to October 2014. According to payroll logs, she personally covered a company meal charged under the name Grant Mercer, at the time, CEO of the company. The room went utterly silent. Maya's eyes widened. Hannah reached over and touched Grant's arm gently. "It was you," she whispered. He couldn't speak. Rutherford continued, his tone softening. There is also a note in the employee file written by Ms. Quinn. It reads, "He looked like he hadn't eaten in days. Sometimes you help people before you know who they'll become." Grant closed his eyes. The memory flooded back. The day he'd been young, broke, and exhausted, pitching investors on a dying startup. He'd forgotten his wallet, too embarrassed to ask for help. A woman with kind eyes had smiled and said, "Warm food helps you think clearer." He'd never known her name. Until now. The judge gave him a moment, then said quietly, "The court recognizes that the connection between Mr. Mercer and the late Ms. Quinn bears relevance to the child's permanency." Dylan Quinn, in shackles at the defense table after his recent arrest, scoffed. "Oh, that's rich. The billionaire saint has a guilt complex." "Mr. Quinn," the judge warned, "another outburst and I'll have you removed." Dylan sneered. "She's mine, and you all know it. That woman," he pointed at Maya, "and this guy." His gaze slashed toward Grant. "They've been plotting this from the start." Hannah rose calmly. "Your Honor, Mr. Quinn's statements are not only false but irrelevant. What matters is Hazel's best interests, and that's not conjecture. It's evidence." She handed the judge a folder. "Enclosed are verified medical, psychological, and educational assessments of Hazel Quinn. Under Colorado's Best Interests Factors statute, every indicator supports continued placement with Mr. Mercer. The child's health has stabilized. Her academic progress is measurable, and her emotional security has improved." Judge Rutherford flipped through the pages, his brow furrowed. Maya added softly, "Your Honor, I've visited Mr. Mercer's home 6 times since the temporary placement began. The child exhibits signs of trust and attachment. She's regained appetite, sleeps through the night, and refers to him as Daddy." The courtroom murmured. Dr. Lena Ward, the guardian ad litem, stood next. "As gal, I am ethically bound to represent the child's wishes." Hazel stated clearly, "I want to stay where I'm not scared." That is all the court should need to hear. Dylan slammed his hands on the table again. "You're all lying. She's confused. He bought you." The bailiff stepped forward. Judge Rutherford's gavel struck once. "Enough." He turned to Dylan, voice steady. "You had every opportunity to show this court you could provide stability. Instead, you engaged in fraud, intimidation, and exploitation. Love cannot live where violence eats." Dylan sank into his chair, silent now, the fight gone from his eyes. Rutherford adjusted his glasses, then looked at Grant. "Mr. Mercer, you understand what permanent custody means. This is not a temporary shelter. It's a lifelong commitment. Financial, emotional, moral." Grant stood, voice trembling. "Your Honor, I understand. I don't want to be her savior. I just want to be her family." The judge nodded slowly. "Then this court finds that reunification with the biological father is not in the child's best interest. Permanent custody of Hazel Quinn is hereby granted to Mr. Grant Mercer." The gavel came down once, a sound like a thunderclap, final, irreversible, and redemptive. After the session, Hazel was brought into the courtroom. She wore a white dress with small yellow flowers, holding the same teddy bear from the hospital. Judge Rutherford leaned forward. "Hello, Hazel. Do you know why you're here today?" She nodded shyly. "'Cause they said I can stay." "That's right." He smiled. "You have a home now, and you can call him Dad as many times as you want." Hazel turned to Grant, eyes bright. "Then, Daddy?" He knelt, tears slipping free as he whispered, "Yes, sweetheart. I'm right here." That night, back at Cherry Creek, The house was quiet except for the soft hum of the heater and the faint sound of wind outside. Hazel sat on the couch, coloring again. Grant watched her, then walked to the study, opening a file drawer. Inside was Nora's employment record, the printed copy Maya had given him. He traced her signature with his fingertips. "She helped me before I ever knew how to help anyone," he murmured. Then he picked up a pen and began drafting a document. The Nora Quinn Foundation. A fund dedicated to supporting single mothers, children of neglect, and winter safety initiatives across Denver. Underneath, he wrote its mission statement. Because kindness isn't a transaction, it's inheritance. Days later, the Denver Gazette published a headline that made front-page news. Mercer wins custody, establishes $25,000 Nora Quinn Fund to support families in crisis. Reporters called it poetic. Shareholders called it unexpected. But for Grant, it was simply right. When asked for comment, he said only, "She once bought me lunch when I couldn't afford it. This is just me paying back the debt. In full." That evening, Hazel fell asleep on the couch, her crayon still in hand. The page before her showed 3 stick figures, one tall, one small, and one with angel wings above them. Beneath, she'd written, "Mommy made us warm." Grant covered her with a blanket and whispered into the quiet room, "Yes, Hazel, she did." The fire crackled softly, its glow reflected in the window. Outside, the city lights shimmered like thousands of tiny hearths, each one a testament to what happens when kindness circles back home. The snow returned to Denver one last time that year, not the kind that buried streets or silenced sirens, but a soft, drifting snow that came only to say goodbye to winter. Inside the Denver Juvenile Court, the air smelled faintly of fresh paper and cocoa. The waiting room was filled with volunteers, CPS workers, and a handful of reporters who had learned by now to whisper. Hazel Quinn, wearing a pale blue dress and white shoes, sat between Grant Mercer and Maya Ortiz. Her small hand clutched a teddy bear dressed in a tiny suit, a gift from Judge Rutherford, who stood before them now in his robes, smiling. "Today," the judge said gently, "we finalize what the law has already confirmed, but what the heart decided long ago." He turned toward Hazel. "Miss Quinn, do you know what adoption means?" Hazel blinked up at him. "It means I don't have to wait outside anymore?" Rutherford's eyes softened. "That's a beautiful way to put it." Laughter and tears rippled quietly through the room. "Then," he continued, "by the power vested in this court and the state of Colorado, I hereby declare Hazel Quinn to be the legal daughter of Mr. Grant Mercer." The gavel came down softly. Once, not like thunder this time, but like a heartbeat. Hazel let out a tiny gasp, then reached for the pen the clerk offered. Her hand shook as she scrawled her new name across the adoption certificate, Hazel Quinn Mercer. When she was done, the judge handed her the teddy bear. "Every child adopted in this court gets one of these," he said. "This one's special. It's been waiting for someone brave." Hazel smiled, hugging it tightly. "Thank you." Grant's eyes glistened as he knelt beside her. "You did it, sweetheart." She looked up. "We did it, Daddy." Outside, snowflakes drifted down as the courthouse doors opened. The press waited, but for once, no one shouted questions. Instead, they simply watched. A quiet reverence for the sight of a man and a little girl stepping out into a white morning, hand in hand. Grant paused on the steps, Hazel's fingers curled around his. "It's cold," she whispered. He knelt, zipped her coat, and smiled. "Cold is fine, Hazel. Cold just means it's time to hold someone." That evening, Cherry Creek glowed in gold light. The house that had once echoed with silence now hummed with warmth, music from the kitchen, laughter spilling through hallways, the smell of cookies Hazel had helped bake. At the table, she handed Grant a small piece of paper folded 3 times. "You can open it now." Inside was a crayon drawing of 3 figures, Hazel, Grant, and an angel with a heart for a face. Above it, in uneven handwriting, she'd written, "Home doesn't mean house, it means hug." Grant felt something in him loosen, the final thread of the old loneliness that had bound him for years. He leaned forward, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "Then this house will never run out of hugs." 2 days later, Project Hearthlight hosted its first public open day. Snow fell lightly outside, but inside the renovated firehouse, everything glowed. Candles flickered, soup simmered, and children in donated coats laughed beneath string lights. Hazel stood at the entrance beside Maya, greeting visitors like a tiny hostess. "Welcome to our warm place," she told each one solemnly. The new mural on the main wall caught everyone's attention. A giant heart shaped like a house, painted by local kids. Beneath it, golden letters read, "Hearthlight Denver. No child waits in the cold." Grant gave a short speech, his voice steady but tender. "This center isn't built from concrete or funding reports. It's built from stories, the kind we once ignored until they shouted loud enough to change us. From this day forward, no one in this city should ever say, 'I didn't know.' Because now, we all do." Applause filled the hall. When it quieted, Maya whispered to Hazel, "You should tell him." Hazel tugged on Grant's sleeve. "Daddy?" He bent down. "Yes, sunshine? Can we make another one of these? For other towns?" He smiled through the sting in his eyes. "Yes, Hazel. For every cold place that still needs light." Weeks later, Mercer Capital's annual ESG report listed something new under its sustainability metrics. Child Winter Safety Index measurement of funded shelters, free legal aid for minors, and trauma-informed outreach across Denver County. Analysts called it revolutionary. Investors called it unconventional. Grant called it human. That spring, the City Council passed a motion officially recognizing Project Hearthlight as a civic partner. At the ribbon cutting for its second center, Hazel stood proudly holding the scissors with both hands. "Ready?" Grant asked. She nodded. 3, 2, warm. The crowd laughed and clapped. The ribbon fell and Hazel giggled, burying her face in Grant's coat. Later that night, back home, she sat by the window, watching the last snow of the season drift down. "Daddy," she said softly, "do you think snow knows when it's time to stop?" He looked at her for a long moment, then smiled. "Maybe it doesn't stop. Maybe it just changes, from cold to water, from water to warmth." Hazel tilted her head. "So even snow can turn into hugs?" "Exactly," he said, pulling her close. She rested her head against his shoulder, eyelids drooping. "Then I'm glad you found me in the snow." Grant's voice broke to a whisper. "No, Hazel. You found me." Outside, the lights of Denver shimmered across wet streets. In the distance, the Hearthlight Center's windows glowed like lanterns, small, steadfast, alive. The city had learned something new that winter, that warmth doesn't come from weather or wealth, but from willingness. And as the snow finally melted, leaving behind soft earth and open roads, Grant Mercer knew this would be his legacy. Not the millions earned, but the hearts kept warm. Because sometimes the coldest nights lead to the brightest fires. And sometimes a barefoot child in the snow teaches a man how to come home.